Welcome to Gajali. Today we have with us a very, very special guest who has just won a very important literary award called New Literary Award for a book, All of Me. I know her for many years, but recently we have been meeting again, and I started reading this book. I can tell you, it was unputdownable. I finished it within just one day, and it's a brilliant book. And I realized that I don't know much about Venita Coelho. Venita Coelho lives in Moira, and she has had a very, very interesting life. And they say the people from Moira are a little bit crazy, but I can assure you that Venita has had, the craziest life, most exciting and adventurous life. So welcome, Venita.
Thank you, Subodh. Wonderful to be here and chatting with you.
So, Venita, let us start with, first of all, congratulations. You have made Goa proud. And this is not the first time you have made Goa proud. You have made, you have won many other literary awards. So please start with those, the list of literary awards you have won.
Okay. Well, I've been writing for children for some time now. I think writing for them is really important because the books that they read shape their imagination and shape who they're going to be. So I have won the Hindu Award for Best Children's Fiction. I won it twice. I won it for a book called Dead as a Dodo, and I won it for a book called Boy Number 32 last year. And All of Me, this book is my newest book. It was out this year. And this one's the one that's kind of caught everyone's imagination. It won the Peekaboo Children's Choice Award. It was on the shortlist for the Crossword Award, and now it's won the Neve Foundation Award for Best Book. So yes, it's having a good year.
So congratulations. And also today, when you met me, there was another great news which you shared with me. I think Goa would be really happy to hear that.
So a book of mine that's not been published yet, an unpublished manuscript, has been picked up by Yashraj Films. They've in fact picked up 3 books of mine and which will be made into web series. So yes, life is getting very exciting in the lockdown, I must say.
Yes. Well, let us begin, Venita. Where were you born?
I was born in Dehradun. My father was with ONGC, and Dehradun is one of the headquarters. So I was born in Dehradun. I was brought up between Dehradun, Lucknow, and Calcutta. And then finally I ran away. I ran away to Mumbai because I was 21 years old. My father asked me, what do you want for your 21st birthday present? And I said, I want to go to Mumbai. Because I had stars in my eyes. I thought I'd go to Mumbai and do fantastic things. So off I went.
And father was obviously not happy.
My father was not happy. Like all good Indian parents, he wanted me to be either a doctor, an IAS officer, or an engineer. A writer, director, artist, none of these things were on the list those days. So he was not happy at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in Bombay, what did you do?
Bombay, I did the social communications media course at Sophia College. It's a 1-year course, and it was actually a wonderful foundation to branch out into working in Mumbai. And as soon as I left them, I joined UTV. UTV had just been formed. Now it's one of the biggest media companies, not just in India, but the world. So I worked with UTV. I worked with various production houses. I had a very long career in television. And that included writing. It included directing. It included being the head of Sony Television. It included being the head of Cinevista's production house. It included being the head of Endemol Fiction. Yeah, I had a really long run.
So you basically started your career as writing scripts and directing for the television.
I started my career as a small little assistant director, and I was working towards being a director. But on one of our shoots, the writer didn't turn up. So they were like, who's going to write the script? And I was just ordered, go and write a script. So I wrote a script and it turned out well. And after that, I kind of became the in-house writer and I discovered I had a knack for this. I'd always been a storyteller. From the time I was a little child, I loved telling stories. When I was in school, all the big girls used to come and borrow me and take me to their classroom and make me stand on the table and say, tell stories. And I tell all these ghost stories and dramatic stories. So I've always been a storyteller, and then I just became a story writer as well.
Well, the Goa must know that you have created 10,000 hours of stories on television.
Yes, I've had a very
tell us a little bit about your journey as a sort of script writer.
So I started off, luckily, when television was just opening up. Doordarshan had finally allowed other channels to come into the country, and ZTV had arrived. And I was the 3rd employee to be hired by ZTV. There were 3 of us and there was only 1 chair. So we used to fight for the chair. So I started doing television at exactly the right time when it exploded. So I did a whole lot of writing, and it was not just for India. I set up, when Malaysia started their television channels, I went to Malaysia, I trained writers. I wrote Malaysia's first daily soap. I've written series for Singapore. So all of that has added up to 10,000 hours of work. But what it did was it really, really exhausted me. And then this horrible thing happened to Indian television. Saas Bahu began. And when this entire Saas Bahu style of storytelling began, in which, you know, we as Indians have so many wonderful goddesses to look up to, but they only chose to celebrate Sati Savitri, who must only suffer for a husband, for a wife, for a family, I couldn't bear it. I said, this is not the message I want to give women, that, you know, please suffer for sanskar and on behalf of your entire family, because I don't believe that women should be doing that. Mm-hmm. And I just quit. I got fed up and I said, I will not write Saas Bahu. It goes against everything that I've stood for as a woman. And I
which
quit.
which were the major television series you made, which you love, which you're proud of?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm very proud of the very first daily soap I wrote. It was called Frikal. And it was set in a coal mine in Bihar. I wrote one that had Marxists and communists, and it had a whole, underneath the drama, it had a whole ideology going on, which I really love. And the one that I'm very proud of is the one that I went back to TV to do, and that was Jassi Jaisi Koi Nahi. Mm-hmm. So I had run away. I was living in Goa. I'd refused to do television, and Sony called me and said, come back. And I said, no. They said, we promise we won't ask you to do Saas Bahu. Will you please take a look at the series that we bought? It was a Mexican series that was adapted. And I took a look at it at Betty La Fey, and I said, wow, now this is the kind of icon I can put out there. This is the kind of heroine I can stand by. So I went back specifically to do Jassi Jaisi Koi Nahi. And up to now, I'm so very proud of that show. And when that show started turning into Saas Bahu, I quit. Because I said, I can't do this to my heroines that I love.
Well, sanskar making is been taken over by the government now, along with the television.
Yeah, well, television's helping the government a lot.
Yes. Well, then you did it for how many years? From 97?
Yeah, for a very long time. You know, even when I ran away from Mumbai and I shifted to Goa, I still continued to write television, but with great care in the choices. I was very clear I wasn't going to do Saas Bahu. So I did alternative kind of writing, which I've been doing for a long time. And you know, the thing in television is everyone comes to you and says, we want a different story. And you say, wow. And then you write the different story. And then they look at it and say, but this is very different. Can we make it a little bit more like this? So, so I've written a lot of television that's never got made. Mm-hmm. But yes, the few things that did get through the cracks that I'm proud of are still out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, tell us about why did you leave Bombay?
You know, I left I was having, every time there's a rain like this in Goa, I remember the moment I left Mumbai, because it was in the middle of the monsoons. It was raining. I was sitting in an auto rickshaw stuck in a traffic jam for 45 minutes in one place. I was tired of writing the kind of television that was now being made. I didn't want to be, you know, involved in this kind of television. I hadn't been paid for a long time. I was exhausted. I sat there in the rickshaw and I said, okay, that's it. I've had enough. I'm leaving. And I left. Next day, I caught a train and came to Goa. That was 21 years ago. And here I am. And when I came to Goa, I thought, that's it. I've left television. I've left film. My career is over. But you know, Goa has a wonderful way of making many of your wishes come true. So I was living in Goa in this house in Asagaon. I think 3 people in Mumbai had my number. Nobody knew where it vanished because I was so fed up. And I didn't even have a phone. My landlord came walking down the road saying, there's a call for you on my phone. So I went there, and it was a production house offering me a film. And I said, okay, I'll write it. And I started writing films. And I did that living in Goa. So I've been very lucky. I've had a career where I've lived in Goa and worked in Mumbai, which now everyone's trying to do after COVID as it, isn't it? But I did it like 21 years ago.
Mm-hmm. But in between, you had also, every weekend is to come to Goa.
So when I started working with Sony said, come and work with us. I said, no, I'm living in Goa. I have no intention of leaving. So they did a deal with me where Monday to Friday afternoon, I'd work in Mumbai, and Friday afternoon, I'd fly back and spend the weekend in Goa. So I was living in Goa and working in Mumbai. And, you know, after Sony, Cinevistas offered me the same deal. And then Endemol offered me the same deal. So it was fantastic. For several years, I would work during the week in Mumbai, earn enough money, and then come back and live in Goa, where I was really, really happy and which is really felt like home for a long time.
Tell us about your other writings. You had already started writing apart from television serials when you were when we were working with the television.
I wrote other stuff to stay sane, because if you write television and you write daily soaps, then you are writing an episode a day. That's a lot of writing. It's writing under insane pressure, and it's writing that's dictated to you. Other people are always telling you what to do with it. So it was driving me mad. So I would write on the side to stay sane. And of course, I started writing children's stories because they made me happy. You write for kids and you put in little jokes and you just have a good time. So I wrote my first book, Dungeon Tales, and it took a very long time to get published. Publishers don't read unknown authors. So my book went from publisher to publisher to publisher, and then it got published. And Dungeon Tales is still in print, and it is still one of the best-selling books that Scholastic has. And that really kicked off the rest of the writing and the rest of my career. I guess I never stopped writing after that. Just went from book to book. Now it's been 10 published books, 3 books in line to be published next year, and a couple of books that I'm writing right now. So yeah, lots of books.
Okay. So tell us about few of these books, and then we'll come to the prize-winning current one. You could talk about whichever books you'd like to talk about. You could talk about why you write for children.
So one of the books I'm very fond of is a book called The Washer of the Dead, and it's a collection of feminist ghost stories. Mm-hmm. I've always felt very strongly about women's issues, and when you live in India, you have to, because you open the paper and every day in the paper, there's some poor woman who's been beaten, who's been burnt, who's been raped. I mean, the kind of things that happen to women in India are horrific. So I wanted to talk about that, but I didn't want to be a chest thumping, giving lectures to people. I said, how do I con them into reading and thinking about women's issues? So I said, let's tell ghost stories. Mm-hmm. So Washer of the Dead is a collection of ghost stories that actually are based around women's issues, but are very, very scary ghost stories as well. And it was longlisted for the Frank O'Connor Award. And Erica Jong considered it one of the best books of the year in the year that it came out. So I'm very proud of that one.
And you're also commissioned now to write a book, feminist book by Arthashila.
Yes, I am. Takshila is a wonderful publishing house. They came to me and they said, what would you like to write, which is so rare. You rarely have a publisher ask you, what would you like to write? And I said, I want, at a child's eye level, for children, I want to explain issues. I want to explain equality. I want to explain that every child, whether boy or girl, has the right to live a life that blossoms, has the right to their choices, has the right to make their own decisions. So they said, go ahead and write it. So that book is in the works. It's being written.
Well, let's now start talking about All of Me. What I would like you to do is show the book and then tell in short this story, and then we can discuss the book.
So this is what the book looks like. When the book starts, we're in absolute darkness. And in the darkness, we hear these voices. We hear the voice of a very old man, very pompous, and this is Mr. Pickwick. We hear the voice of a young, old fluttery woman. She's a governess, Miss Trent. We hear a young boy who's very smart. His name is Skinner. And then we hear a very young boy, and he's the infant prodigy. And all of these are part of the family. The family are characters that our main hero, Castor, has imagined and created in his head, because he's been locked up in darkness for many, many years. He's been held captive in an underground cellar. He's been told, you're in danger and you better stay here. And in the darkness, for company, he's created all these characters. These are his multiple personalities. And when he's finally freed from the dungeon and he comes out, he wants to know why he was locked up. And so he becomes detective with the help of his multiple personalities. So that's as unusual a detective as you can get. The book's also unusual because it's set in 18th century England. It's in Queen Victoria's reign. And as Castor goes in search of this person, why was I locked up? Why am I in danger? He stumbles upon the true story of the Kohinoor diamond. The book has an Indian connection. Castor has an Indian connection. And Castor finally discovers what it is, and he solves the mystery of why he was locked up. And we get to know the real story of the Kohinoor diamond.
Yeah, so it is a wonderful thing. So you are talking about at times when Ranjit Singh was ruling Punjab, and the British were trying to sort of appropriate all the kingdoms. and the last one left was Ranjit Singh. And there's a story which connects with that. So this is the first one you have been writing, which is set up in some kind of a historical setup?
Yes, actually, this is the first one that has an historical background. Mm-hmm. And, I get asked very often, what is your inspiration? And I always say, I never write out of inspiration. I write when I get really angry. And this book came out of anger. Yeah. David Cameron, the Prime Minister of England, was here in India, and he was asked, are you going to return the Kohinoor? And he said, I don't believe in returnism. And that was such a rude, arrogant reply. I got really mad. And I said, Chalo, let's write a book about the true history of the Kohinoor. So this book was actually a response to colonial arrogance. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. But I did want to tell it at a child's eye level. I wanted children to know about their colonial heritage, not as dry as dust history books, which don't really touch your heart, but in a way that would touch their heart and make them think. And so this became a children's book.
Mm-hmm. What is fascinating about this book for me is that you are imagining that the hero of your book, Castor, has all these other characters living inside him. So the family is actually just him, but all of them are living inside his head. And actually, so this is almost like a psychological analysis of things. So you have a lot of influence of, let's say, Freud and how did this plot of having so many people living in Castor's head come about?
Well, I think all writers are quite fascinated by multiple personalities, because what a story idea multiple personalities is. And then I started to research it, and more than Freud, it was actually Carl Jung that became my kind of inspiration, because he talked about these patterns in every man's head, in our subconscious. He said every man is actually several personalities that are archetypes in our head. We are wise old men. We have a feminine side. We have a dark shadow, which we try to suppress. So to me, that was very interesting. And my other guru is a writer called Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is a mythologist who studied myths across the world. And he came up with the idea of the monomyth. He said, whichever culture I go to, every story that they tell me always has the same story. It always starts with a hero who is called to action. Something happens and he has to respond. And he goes on a journey, he has adventures, and finally he wins something and he comes back. And he said, every story has this structure, whether it is, and if you look at it, that's the structure of the Ramayana. It's also the structure of Harry Potter. So this was very fascinating to me. And while he talked about the monomyth, he also talked about the regular characters that occur in, whether it's Norse mythology or Indian mythology or Chinese mythology, it's the same. It's the wise old man, the mentor, it's the feminine principle, it's the trickster character, it's the shadow. So for me, both these things came together. The eternal story that's told around the world and the eternal story that plays out in our subconscious. And somehow both of these came into the book and became a visual metaphor. It became a young child who now has these multiple personalities in his head that he must unite to become whole. He's a fractured child, but he has to unite of all of this to become his own true self, and that becomes his journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the book has it begins with the boy in the dungeon, in the cellar, in the dark cellar, and then you have a story of where he goes to the hill and sits in a hot air balloon. Where did the balloon come from?
So, as you know, Subodh, I also paint a little bit. I've been learning to paint with you. So I tend to think very visually. So the first visual that came to my mind when I started writing the book was actually this dungeon. And then the second visual that came to mind was the extreme opposite of a dungeon. What's the opposite of a dungeon? And to me, the opposite of a dungeon was a balloon up in the air in sunshine with clouds around it. I said, that's the hero's journey. He has to start in the dungeon and he has to end there, absolutely free. So these were the two visual metaphors that held the story together. And he journeyed from one extreme to the other extreme as he became whole.
Mm-hmm. There is another anecdote in the book which interests me very much. There is this maid, the housekeeper. And the housekeeper falls down and Joshua holds her and her knees are exposed. And knees are exposed and she's scandalized. So now, I'm always thinking about how we have a problem with nudity in India, which actually comes from the knees which were exposed there. There's a Victorian, they didn't like to expose anything. And our anti-nude propaganda, which happens especially with the right wing in India, I believe that the right wing does not know when they are against nudity. Actually, they're supporting the Victorian ways. It's not the Indian ways. Indian ways is Khajuraho. Nudity was
Absolutely.
never a taboo here. So tell us a little bit about how did you sort of include that sentence there? Were you thinking about the same thing?
Absolutely, Subodh, you've hit the nail on the head. Along with colonialism, the British brought to us their very Victorian idea of prudery and being pure and not exposing. And we've carried this burden on our backs since when, as you're right, our heritage is Khajurai, where sex is sacred, where a human body, a female form is sacred. Instead, we have this entire burden of prudery and shame that came with us with the colonial heritage. We fought so hard to be independent of everything else, but this we have embraced.
Okay, absolutely.
We've kept this heritage. It
The
makes
height
no
of it
sense.
was in Panjim, there's a mermaid
Uh,
in the garden. And one of my friends who belongs to the right wing, he couldn't stand the breast of this mermaid, and he took a towel and covered her breast with a towel. And
please
then
ask him. Please ask him to also cover the eyes of every child that suckles at a mother's breast.
yeah,
I mean, how can you be prudish about a breast, which is what nurtures life in this world for every man and every woman? I think it is a shame that you feel ashamed about this. That's where you came from. That's where you fed from.
let us go to, you have described the life of Dilip Singh, the son of Ranjit Singh, in London. Tell us a little bit about that.
I found him such a fascinating and such a sad story. Dilip Singh, my story catches him when he comes to London to present the Kohinoor to Queen Victoria. He was just 14 years old. He was separated from his mother when he was 5 years old and never allowed to see her. He was put in charge of a British, a governor who kind of worked on him very hard to try and make him convert. He was forced to hand over the Kohinoor, and in later years, he called Queen Victoria Mrs. Fagin because he says, she stole my diamond from me. He was taken apart from his culture, kept in London because that suited the British. And in London, he was known as the Black Prince. I mean, it doesn't get more racist than that, does it?
Yeah.
And this poor man was cut off from everything, from his heritage, from what he stood for, from his religion. He was about 30 before some Sikh priests actually managed to smuggle themselves into London, met him and explained who he was. He was the last living son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, one of the most powerful, most clever, strategic Maharajas of India, the only one who stood out against the British when the rest of India was under the British rule. Ranjit Singh was still ruling the Punjab. Until his death, the Britishers was able to do nothing. And Dilip Singh had this life where he was torn apart from the context which made sense of who he was, which is India. And so I wanted to tell that story, but I wanted to tell it again at a child's eye view, where we see an unhappy 14-year-old boy who's lost his mother, who has been taken to an alien land where the sun never shines. He says it just rains here. So from his point of view, to make that connect. So Dilip Singh is in the book, but at that age, at that moment when he's come to hand over the Kohinoor.
And your hero then becomes his mother's sister's son.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our hero eventually discovers that in him, East meets West. He's half British and half Indian, and he's related to Dilip Singh. Yeah. So he has to find a way to reconcile these two completely different heritages that come together in this person. Yeah.
Oh, it's a brilliant book. At the end of the book, you are basically talking about you are going to write another one where Kester comes to India to find his parents and then participates in the 1857 mutiny or War of Independence.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm looking forward to doing that. I thought that Kester must come to India. And again, I'd love to tell 1857 through a child's eye view. Explain it at a level where children can understand what really went on. So I'm very excited about writing that, and I want to research the mutiny and tell a truly Indian tale at a truly child's eye level of what happened at that point.
Okay. So I think really waiting to read that one. Tell us a little bit about, especially for the young writers who sort of just embarking on that career. Are you a very sort of disciplined writer? You write from this time to this time. How does it go with you?
You know, I'm a very disciplined writer because in Goa you have to be. In Goa, it's so easy to be undisciplined. It's so easy to say, "Acha, today I'll go to the beach. Okay, maybe I'll just take a siesta." So when I shifted here, I saw a lot of my friends doing that, and I said, "I'm not doing that. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to write." So I do. I get up and I write. The thing is, I also have a very full life because I'm a single mom and I homeschool my daughter and I do all kinds of things. So I don't judge myself on how much I can write in a day. I might write 2,000 words, which is a good writing day. I might write 2 lines. It doesn't matter, but I write every single day. The effort is made every single day.
And what will be your advice to the young writers?
You know, a lot of young kids ask me, "Oh, we want to be a writer." And then I ask them, "Well, what have you written?" And they're like, they want to be writers without writing. Writing is like any other skill. If you wanted to learn the piano, you would sit down and you would practice every day. Writing is the same. There's no difference. Writing is don't wait for inspiration. You want to be a good writer, write. Write every single day. Practice and practice and practice until you get better. You know that saying that when you've done 10,000 hours of something, then you're really an expert. Works for writing as much as for television, as much as for anything else. So my advice really would be to write.
So thank you, Venita. I think it's very lovely. Goa is proud of you, and I think you will inspire many young writers. Thanks for joining. And
Thank you so much.
yeah.
Very happy to chat with you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Venita.